Welcome, welcome, welcome. Doing a live stream, which is really for those who want to hang out with me, crossing their fingers that I might say something profound that helps them open up, fear less, and love more. I'll be here for about an hour. But I just asked a question, and I'm really genuinely curious if there is anything. What are the big questions that you have around the overarching theme of spirituality? And we'll see if anything comes back in the comment section. And it's possible those that are here don't really have any questions about that. That's a great question. Why is it so difficult when you lose a loved one, even though it's natural? How to be spiritual without a belief in God? That's a great question, too. A question about the future, what's to come as humanity evolves. I like it. Thank you so much for contributing those questions. Welcome back, Caroline. Welcome back, Amelia. Amelia, my financial supporter. 2 big donations yesterday. Thank you. Yeah, that's right. Welcome, Diana, first time. I guess we're still kind of settling in here. I really have something on my mind that I want to say. Diana, first time here and already donated? That's amazing. Thank you so much. So I have something specific that I want to talk about. But, as it goes, I can feel it and I can see it, but I'm not quite sure about the words to use. But it's deeply sincere and it comes absolutely from my heart. And underneath whatever comes out of my mouth is a message that says, I love you, and I'm sorry if you're hurting. Do you guys notice that? And I guess I do wonder, as you keep coming back or you listen to my recordings, I wonder if you hear that that's the undertone. And not just get lost in all the concepts as if we've figured something out, but really a permission to see that you're loved and to see that your humanity is allowed and to see that you are supported while also acknowledging that, yeah, sometimes it's hard and that's okay. And I want to do everything I can to support you in the way that I can, which is doing what I do, which is running my mouth about spiritual insights and wisdom. And if you were here with me in person, I'd just give you a hug. I might not have a lot to say. All right, let's get this show on the road. Another question came in from a different source. It says, do you believe in God? Well, my goodness, I'll try and include this somehow, what I'm going to talk about, because surely it applies. And in one way, it's such a big topic, but it's so simple. Okay, let me take my ceremonial moment of silence here. To just invite myself to be present. Get out of my own way. Welcome to this space. The intention here is to hang out with you for a little while and share some deep spiritual insight and wisdom that might invite you to open up, fear less, and love more. And I feel really moved to talk about something. I can see it clearly and I can feel it deeply, but I'm ultimately unsure about the words to use or how to communicate it. But really what it comes down to is a profound simplicity related to the nature of what we'll just call spirituality. And the reason I think this is so monumentally important is because it's so easy for there to be this great complexity that ultimately becomes a distraction from the real and most sincere invitation of spirituality. And so that's what I'm going to do. In a playful and maybe poetic way, answer the question, what is spirituality really? And maybe furthermore, why does it matter and why should I care? And I'm going to take my time. I'm going to speak slowly. Barbara, I see your huge donation and your mention that you can't stay tonight. Well, if you can still hear me, send me a message. And I think it might be possible for you to still hear this. I'm going to take my time. I'm going to speak slowly. And I guess the best way to go about this is to make it clear what is the function and invitation of spirituality. Why is spirituality even spirituality? And of course, we have many different forms of spirituality. We have many different traditions, many different practices. Many different paths, but they all share a commonality. What would that commonality be? In some way, at least right now, there's an invitation to get in touch with something. And maybe the promise of spirituality is this something that you get in touch with somehow resolves or lessens the suffering we experience as human beings. In many ways, we can see that that has been the promise of spirituality, to introduce a deeper peace and freedom, a love, a wholeness, a unity. Maybe we can say an opportunity to be more present, to be unbothered by what seems to be the chaos in our lives or in the world. An invitation to be more grounded. Would you agree with me on that? Amidst all the different traditions, all the different pointings, in some way that's what it's pointing to? There's a bunch of noise going on outside. I'm waiting for it to pass. And you know, in everything that spirituality points to, invites, or promises. We could call it many different things. We can use many different words to describe it. And depending on the tradition or the path, there's a selection of favorite words that might be different from a different path. But fundamentally, all of those words are pointing to the same thing. Which introduces an interesting predicament, because it's not uncommon for those different paths or traditions to think that their words are the right words. Which is one of those traps of spirituality that only leads us to completely miss the point of what is being pointed to. It speaks more to our human determination to be right than it is to really know what's true about spirituality. And maybe to speak a little bit about the value of spirituality in relationship to our very real human lives. There's what I'm going to call an invitation of discernment, where spirituality is inviting you to see something. And maybe that something is quite profound, but it's to see an aspect of our human experience that's quite true. And that is the vast difference between the life we imagine to be happening and the life that's actually happening. What do I mean by that? And of course, what I'm talking about now can be talked about in many different ways, many different illustrations or stories to talk about it. But it all is essentially inviting us to see the same thing. There is what we think about life, and then there is real life. And I want to go slow here because I know it's easy to think, oh, I get that. Oh, that makes sense. But I caution you on thinking that you've figured this out, because it is actually quite deep and has a massive implication on your entire life. Furthermore, it speaks to the source of all of your emotional disturbances, which circles back around to the promise of spirituality, which in some way is to heal those emotional disturbances. So there is this invitation of spirituality to discern the difference between reality and what is going on in your mind. Can we acknowledge those two things? Even as you sit here now, there is the reality of this moment, and then within you is the capacity to think about anything. And yet, that which you are thinking about isn't actually here in reality. Meaning, you could think about next week. You could think about a week ago. You could tell a particular story about this moment. And yet, whatever you're thinking about, it's almost like it projects it onto reality, but it's not actually in reality. Where is it? It's entirely contained in your imagination. It's not really here. but it is seen as here because it's seen in the imagination. Is that clear? And in one way, it seems self-evident. It seems obvious. But I also understand that there are some people on this journey where that's difficult to see. So much so we go through this life and it's like we assume that what we think is actually happening. There's not the discernment between the two. It's almost to say we tell stories and then we think those stories are an accurate reflection of reality. But just like in this moment, you could almost look at it this way. Say there's 1,000 people at the same time here with me now. Do you see how there's 1,000 different versions of now happening in the mind? But yet, in a very real way, it's the same now for everyone. Let's imagine we're all in the same room. It's the same room. It's the same now. But there's 1,000 different experienced realities, which are 1,000 different stories. Now, furthermore, let's take an honest look at our human experience. Do you notice that as you have gone through this life, as far back as you can remember, there's been this life that has been happening, your life, and let's just say predominantly it's taking place in the mind, but you didn't realize it was happening in the mind. You thought it was happening in life. You told 1,000 different stories, and something in you thought that those stories were life. And here's the interesting thing. Do you notice that as you have lived your life, there's been a constant presence of now that is very similar to the now that is happening now? Do you see that? It's almost like nothing has actually happened. There's been an immensity of stories being told. It's like, in one way, it looks like so much has happened. But the question here is, how much of that something was just the mind imagining something which looked like it was real? Do you see this? In one way, it's a very, 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 very innocent misunderstanding where we are living life, but unknowingly we're actually living the mind. Maybe it appears to be very tricky. Like, is this life? Is this the mind? What's going on here? Now, here's the most important question, at least for right now in this inquiry. And this is something that you can only see in your own direct experience, which is another important aspect of spirituality, is that it is the invitation for the one who has ears to hear or eyes to see, which means it's only for you. It's a very intimate experience. So in looking at the very real experience of your life, not what you think about somebody else's life, but for your life, let me ask you a question. How much of your suffering, how much of your irritations, your disappointments, your heartache or your heartbreak was in response to what was going on in your mind as opposed to what was actually happening in reality? Honest question. Even if there is emotional disturbance in you right now, what is that emotional disturbance responding to? What's here right now? Or what's going on in the mind? Now here's the thing. Without this discernment, you might look at what's going on in the mind and really think that's going on in life, because you can't see the difference between the two. That's understandable. But in asking that question, isn't it amazing to see how much you have suffered in response to what's going on in the mind rather than in response to what was actually happening in reality? And can you see the misunderstanding that in that suffering there was the assumption that what was going on in the mind was actually going on in reality? It was a misunderstanding of experience. We can call it a confusion. It's almost like taking something personally, which happens in the mind, and then thinking that it's actually happening in reality. So you see this discernment. This is the foundation of the spiritual invitation. And it's so funny because in the concept of spirituality, I mean, my goodness, how lost can we get in the woo-woo of it all? How lost can we get in the spiritual practices of it all, or the traditions, or which one is the right one and which one is the wrong one? When at their essence, they're all pointing to this thing that I'm speaking about. In its essence, it's actually profoundly simple. Especially if the promise or the invitation is in some way to heal the suffering. This is how that happens. By seeing life more clearly, which we might also call a deeper understanding. And I guess as a side note, all of these things that we crave, like love, peace, freedom, compassion, forgiveness, yada, 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 all things lovely. Do you notice that these things tend to come with a deeper understanding? As if you're seeing the bigger picture, which is also like saying you're seeing more of what's really happening. Beyond the particular perspective or assumption or opinion being held in the mind. Do you also notice that this is the invitation of all spiritual practices? Whether it's prayer, meditation, yoga, singing mantras, whatever, and there's 1,000 of them. Do you see how they are all invitations to come back to the present moment and to get out of your mind? And to connect a little bit more with the reality that's actually happening? Do you see that that's what's happening right now in this practice? Even though we might be using our bodies, we might even be using our minds, but we're using it in service to coming back to this moment, to remind ourselves about what's actually happening. And this is why, as we do this, as we come back to the present moment, those tensions, those anxieties start to fade away. Because those tensions and those anxieties were in response to the misunderstanding that all of the fearful things going on in my mind are not actually happening right now. I'm imagining a danger and bringing it into this moment, but that danger is not actually here. And so in many ways, the essence of spirituality is a doorway into what is real. And the more we enter into what is real, the more it becomes impossible to suffer. Can you see how that might be? And again, all we have to do is look at the nature of our suffering, which is to also get very honest about our suffering. And again, not what you think is other people's suffering, but your suffering. And just very quickly, let's distinguish the difference between suffering and pain. Yes, there's the experience of physical pain where you touch a hot stove and it hurts. This isn't suffering. Touching a hot stove and getting burned doesn't require suffering. In fact, touching a hot stove and getting burned is an alarm mechanism in life that says, please don't do that. Do you notice this? The experience of pain gets your attention. The experience of pain gets your attention and says, come back to the present moment. There is something happening in reality. Do you see that? There is something happening in reality that needs your attention for you to continue on in wellness. So in essence, honestly, physical pain is an expression of love that cares about you, that wants you to be in wellness. So what is suffering? Well, as a playful illustration related to touching a hot stove, it's what comes afterwards where you spend a week or a month thinking you're an idiot because you touched the stove. It's the deep felt sense of unworthiness, of being not enough, of feeling unloved, feeling rejected. Do you see the difference? It's an inner pain related to a personal sense of identity in search of its worth and value. And so the suffering, in effect, feels like your identity is unworthy of love as a way of expressing it. And again, we could say a completely different sentence about it, but in some way, it's that. It's a pain in the core of your being that feels utterly lost. unworthy. And interestingly, the physical pain we experience on the surface with touching a hot stove is very similar to the pain we experience on the inside of what we are. They are both alarm mechanisms that are trying to tell you something is out of alignment with wellness. And do you notice this? The internal pain you experience, which we'll just call suffering, has a similar effect where it invites you back to the present moment. It says, hey, something is going on here. And it becomes difficult to move forward in life. Something's off. Something is out of alignment. And here's the direct answer to all of that. As we've explored a little bit, the suffering is in response to what's going on in the mind. It speaks to the way that you are seeing, the way that you are perceiving, your interpretations, your assumptions, your beliefs. And the more out of alignment they are with the truth of what is, they will hurt. Just like if someone sends you a text message that says, I can't hang out, you can interpret that as meaning I'm less than. I'm unworthy of love. That will hurt. In some way, in effect, it's like the pain is saying the way you are perceiving is not true. And it's not helpful. Please don't continue on in life thinking this about yourself. So that pain invites you back to the present moment to ask the question, wait, what's really going on here? What's happening in real life, not in my mind, but what's happening in reality? Oh, I'm giving this a meaning that it doesn't really mean. And I'm believing that meaning as if it's in reality, and it's not. I am seeing myself as less than, which also means I'm withholding love from myself, which is not in alignment with the truth of what I am. In many ways, it's like saying life doesn't love me. That hurts. Why? Because it's not true. Do you see this deeply sincere question? Wait, what is really going on here? In some way, that's spirituality. To see things more clearly. To get in touch with the reality of this moment. Unconfused from what's going on in the mind. And the beauty of this is as you get more in touch with reality, your mind starts to reflect reality. Which is to say, it becomes more beautiful. Which is to also say, the original intention of your mind. Which can be a very beautiful thing. But a mind that is lost, which is to also say a mind that is afraid, becomes a terrifying place to be. In many ways, as illustrated through some spiritual traditions, there is a mind that rests in heaven and a mind that rests in hell. And what it comes down to is, are you seeing the truth of life? Then you're in heaven. And if you're not, you're in hell. You see, the instrument of mind, it's a creative instrument. It's not an instrument that can find what is true. This might be important to clarify, because we spend so much time in our mind thinking that we found what is true. If we have discerned the difference between life in the mind, which is an important step to move further into the inquiry, to see the profound difference between life and the mind is to also recognize that everything that goes on in the mind is a product of imagination, which in effect is to create something that's not really there. Do you see that? Let's look at it this way. Here's an illustration for you. Imagine we are sitting in a field and the sun's going down, and you have a blank canvas and some paintbrushes. And here you're looking at the reality of a sunset. And you start painting a picture of the sunset. And your painting is beautiful. Now let me ask you an important question. Is your painting of the sunset actually the sunset? Is your painting of it the reality of it? Or is your painting simply an expression of the truth that you see, which is what appears to be the reality before you? And furthermore, in your attempt to paint the sunset, it's kind of like a form of communication that shows other people what you see. But even if you show other people your painting of the sunset and they look at your painting, are they now looking at the reality of the sunset? Or are they just looking at your painting, which isn't the real thing? Do you see that this is what goes on in the mind? We're painting pictures. We're telling stories. And yet our stories are not the real thing. Well, what then is the real thing? That's a fun question. Because to answer the question of what is the real thing, all you can do is paint a picture of it. Do you see that? If I say, what is the truth about the sunset? All you can do is use words, symbols, and images, which is to paint a picture, which are not the real thing. Now, to me, this is profoundly simple, and I understand how complicated it might seem. But for some reason, I just want to say, stick with the simplicity here. We're simply discerning the difference in 1,000 different ways. Because just as easily, you could paint a picture of the sunset and think that, oh, this is the real sunset. I've captured it. This is what it is. No, it might look like the sunset, but just as easily somebody else comes along and says, hey, you're a terrible painter. That doesn't look like the sunset. It looks like a 4-year-old with some crayons. Do you see my point? Just like you can tell a story about what happened yesterday as you were hanging out with your friend, and then your friend tells a completely different story. Just like returning to the example of 1,000 people in this room, 1,000 different stories. Do you see that we are all just painting a picture? We're being creative. We are creating in the imagination. And you know what's kind of funny about this? Is the more that you know that your painting isn't the real thing, the more fun you have painting. Which is kind of like saying, the more you think you have to get it right, the more anxious you become as you paint. What a freedom to know that you can't really get it right. The point is not to get it right. In many ways, the point is to simply paint the most sincere picture. Which speaks a lot to this thing that I do, which is seemingly talking about what is real and true. I already know that I've failed. It can't really be spoken. Therefore, it becomes poetic. It becomes a song to sing. There doesn't need to be the fear of getting it wrong. And isn't it interesting when we look at us as human beings, our society, how determined people are to be right in what they think or what they believe, in what they think or what they believe, as if their painting is the right painting about what's real? Doesn't that also express a little bit what we experience in our human lives with our fear of being wrong and our determination to be right? Do you see how all of this commotion is ultimately just a bunch of mind noise? It's a life lived in the mind, completely and often unaware of the life that's actually happening. This is why I want to take my time, because I understand that there's a lot of human beings who live this life completely unaware of the real life. It doesn't even make sense to the idea that there is a life beyond the mind. It can seem completely foreign. But yet, my goodness, everything we crave, whether it's connection, intimacy, forgiveness, love, compassion, acceptance. All of these, what we might call spiritual values or virtues, the reality of what they are found in real life. They are what hold the whole thing together. Which is quite a wild thing to recognize or to find out. And I know that that might sound a little bit abstract, but let me just say it directly. And again, I'm using words and it can't actually be spoken, so I've already failed. But the point being that reality itself is woven together by love. In the most real way. But again, it's a painting. That the thing that you crave most in this life, and it depends, of course, on how honest you can get with yourself about what you actually crave in this life. But the more you exhaust yourself in the world, and you start to realize that what I really crave is connection. What I really crave is some flavor of love. What you're craving for is reality. What you're craving for is something that's real. What you're craving for is the truth of your nature. What you're longing for is to get out of the chaos in your mind and to come home. And of course, here's the ancient struggle. Because of the misunderstanding that thinks the mind is real, we have so many precious things in the mind that we don't want to let go of. And you cannot bring the unreal into the real. Is that clear, or does that sound cryptic? It seems like such a powerfully on-point pointer. You cannot bring the unreal into the real. In essence, you have to let go of everything that's being tightly held onto in the mind in order to allow yourself to deeply melt into reality. And we are absolutely riddled with conditioning that has convinced you that there are prizes in the mind that you simply cannot let go of, most often of which is what other people think about you. That's definitely happening in the mind. This could also be stories of achievements, and furthermore, even stories of pain that tell you who you are, which again is happening in the mind. In order to step into what's real, those things must be let go of. You can't bring it with you. It's like you're wanting to see the sunset so badly, but you're staring at the painting and you refuse to lay down the painting because you've associated some profound meaning of the painting that tells you who you are, and it's just a painting. But I don't know who I am without this painting. I can't let it go. And if I let it go, I don't know who I am anymore. You see that this is what's going on in our human lives? We have this painting of ourselves that is held together by story, held together by activity in the mind, which is a collection of thoughts, a lot of which is about what other people think about you, or a fear about what other people think about you as well. Do you see this? And this is one of those important aspects of this whole inquiry. Even as we say, seeing the truth of what really is, it's deeply associated. It's deeply associated with seeing deeply the truth of what you are, the truth of you, because there is a you that lives in the mind that's not really what you are. Furthermore, just as we've been talking about, this character that lives in the mind can seem like it's real, right? That's really who I am. But again, don't you see, it's just a painting. It's a painting you've been painting for years, and you've relied on it. In many ways, it's been your foundation. It's the story you go to for a sense of grounding in this human experience, which isn't to say it's wrong. It's not even to say you shouldn't. It's what we do as human beings. But the question here is, what's really true? And furthermore, it's helpful to look and see that your suffering your emotional disturbances are deeply tied to that painting of you. This might take some stillness to see. And again, it's funny because without the discernment and without some sort of experience of being still and clearly seeing the difference, this could all just not make any sense at all. But to be still and to recognize that there is this idea of yourself existing in your mind, that something in you believes is really you, but it's just in the mind. And it's this self in the mind that suffers terribly. Which is also to say, the realness of you doesn't suffer. Furthermore, the mind cannot see the realness of you because all the mind can do is paint pictures. So when you look at what the mind says is you, it's not that. Is that cryptic? Is that clear? Very much like when you look at another human being, what do you see? Do you see them, or do you see your idea of them? Just like this moment, do you see this moment, or do you see your mind's content? Here's an exercise for you. Look in the mirror and ask yourself, do I see you, or do I see my mind's content? Or do I see my mind's stories? Which is to also say, or do I see my judgment? Do I really see you? Which is so funny because the more you seek to really understand the truth of what you are, judgment starts to fall away. Because you have to get out of the mind. And when you get out of the mind, you see what's really there. And there can't be any judgment there. Can you start to see why it is we see heaven? where judgment is not allowed to go? And what is love other than the complete absence of judgment? The total embrace of what is, with not a single thought that says you're unworthy. Just a heart that says, I see you. I see you totally. And as it relates to the spiritual story, is this not what God says to you? I love you. And what is this concept of God other than another painting that points to something that cannot be spoken? Do you see that? This is why I find it funny, the questions of, Tiger, do you believe in God? What does that even mean, to believe in God? Because you have an idea, an image, a painting of God, and you're asking me if I believe in your image or painting of God. I can't even see your image or painting of God. How can I answer that question? And if I had my own image and painting of God, are you asking me if I believe that my painting is the real thing? We already established that. The painting is not the real thing. This is why, in many ways, the closer you get to the truth of what is, belief is irrelevant. Belief is a mind thing. Belief can be helpful. It can be a pointer, but just as easily it can be a trap. Because we just start saying, my painting is the right painting. It's the true painting. And everyone who doesn't agree that my painting is the right painting, well then, they're going to hell. Which speaks to the adorable aspect of our humanness that is, again, desperately trying to be right because it helps keep the image of ourselves together. And it speaks to the adorable human, let's just say, insanity that is constantly seeking to protect its character in the mind with ideas. It's kind of like, as we live our human lives, we constantly hope other people are having certain thoughts about us. Do you see how this is trying to keep a particular character together in the mind? Oh, if only enough people think I'm awesome, then I can be awesome. If only enough people think I'm right, then I can see myself as right. Which means the character in my mind is now more real. Seeking validation. Validation for what? Who you think you are. Which is kind of like saying to the world, help me prove that I exist. Help me prove that who I think I am is real. And again, there's nothing in what I'm saying that this is wrong. This is just speaking to the way of things. This is answering the question, what's really going on here? But again, painting a picture about it. Whether you see what I'm pointing to or not, I don't really know. And it's possible that I'm doing a terrible job as a painter. which makes this all hilarious and fun and super sweet. And so, as I've been doing for over a decade now, we can talk unendlessly about these things. I could sit here for another 5 hours and keep running my mouth. There's so much to explore. There's so many paintings to paint that point to something that's amazing and beyond words, related to the truth of what actually is and the truth of what you are, and how much love and connection and forgiveness and freedom and peace is available the more we see what's true, which is also to say, the more we let go of what's not true. And sometimes it's really hard and scary. But as you walk through that fire, you will eventually see that there wasn't anything to be afraid of. The fear itself as well is an innocent misunderstanding. Because in reality, in what is true, there's nothing to be afraid of. And again, that can be its own rabbit hole. I've talked many times about that. So this is my playful attempt to paint a picture of what spirituality is really about, beyond all the woo-woo, beyond the hyperbole and the marketing promises. It's just a very sincere question from a deep place of your heart, from a deep place in your heart that asks, what is really going on here? And the more honestly we look, then the spiritual promise, so to speak, is to connect more with what it is you truly crave. Not what your mind craves, not what your mind is chasing, which is a way of protecting your illusion of a separate sense of self-importance, but what your heart craves, which is to be deeply connected with life, to be one with life, to be one with everyone else. And it could be said, to tell a story, this is why you're here having a human experience, to see the truth of what you are. This is the real point of it all. Which is also like saying the real point of it all is to fall deeply in love with life. And then share that love with everyone you encounter. What an adventure that is. Thanks for hanging out with me. It's so amazing how I can just sit here for an hour and just run my mouth and then forget everything I just said. But know that it was beautiful, because underneath it I was just saying that I love you and you're free and I'm sorry if you're hurting. Any questions before I bounce out of here? I didn't pay much attention to the comments. But Elle, I did see your donation. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate your guys' willingness to support this thing that I do. That it feeds you in some way. it's inspiring for me to keep doing what I'm doing. Do you agree with me that there is just this profound simplicity? And I understand that in our humanness it seems complex, but it's complex in the mind. And I understand that. Sometimes it's really hard, but it's okay. In many ways, it's supposed to be a challenge. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Diana, for the donations. Thank you, Michelle. In the simplicity of these things that I'm talking about, please understand that the love that is interwoven in it all completely embraces your humanity. Meaning, it's so easy for the mind to hear these things and create expectations of how you should be. And that isn't what we're doing here at all. That's not the point. If anything, that's so often what makes this human journey so difficult, is clinging to the idea of how you should be rather than getting in touch with how you are. Which in another way is extending a tremendous amount of compassion. But it's also to take radical responsibility. So it's not avoiding yourself, and it's not abandoning yourself. Amelia, thank you so much. If anything, it's a deep humility. A voice from your heart that says, yeah, I'm human too. It's a recognition that finds it impossible to put yourself above another human being. That, yeah, I'm going through the same thing we're all going through. And that's okay. Well, Amelia, you've donated so much that I'm going to start using some of your money to buy food other than just coffee. So not only will you keep me caffeinated, but well fed. So thank you. Thank you, Cher, for the donation. This is the highest donation amount I've ever seen in all of my live broadcasts on Inside Timer. Which makes sense because that was a really good talk. So thank you for that. That's fun to see. All right, so next week, I don't think I'll be scheduling 6 live sessions, but at least a couple. And I'm going to change the time. My schedule's changing a little bit next week. And so this week I've been doing this at 8:15 a.m. my time. But to accommodate next week, they'll be at, I think, somewhere around 5:30 a.m. my time. I think. So a couple hours backwards. I think, yeah. Yeah, it works for the Australians. I mean, it's not the middle of the night for you. It doesn't work well for the Europe folks. I keep trying to do something for the Europe folks, but it's late in my day. And I go to bed super early because I get up super early. And so once I start reaching 4 or 5 o'clock, I'm already done. I'm in the Philippines, so that's my time zone. It's 9:30 a.m. for me right now. Today is my Friday. You're welcome. Oh, I forgot to check. Oh, no. Okay. I'm going to check out unless I see any questions pop up. Oh, thank you so much, Blossom. Yeah, and you guys feel free to send me any messages privately if there's something that you want me to address on these or just in general. It's totally fine to reach out. I like hearing from you. All right, my dears. Maybe see you next week. Tell your friends too. Yes, they are recorded. But they're not recorded on Insight Timer, meaning I can't share them on Insight Timer. And according to the Insight Timer rules, I'm not allowed to tell you about anything other than what's on Insight Timer. So I guess that's enough information for you to investigate. Yeah, Caroline, that's one place. But there's usually like a 3 or 4 week window. And sometimes they don't. Do you have a card to join your next session? No. I haven't scheduled any. I'm going to schedule some more today. But just go to my profile. And then if you go to my About section of my profile, there's a link there where if you click that link, it might increase your chances of finding the recording. Maybe. I have a bunch of promotional cards here, but it's just my retreat coming up, Conscious Life Design, donation, profile. Question comes in, do you just travel the world and live in different places? I guess that's one way of saying it. Currently, I've been in the Philippines for a year. I don't have any intentions of leaving anytime super soon. I can imagine myself staying here indefinitely. I could also imagine myself going somewhere else. But yeah, for the past 10 or 11 years, as I've been doing this work, I've kind of gone all over the globe, lived in a bunch of different places. But I'm feeling a bit of an itch to get back out and connect with people in person for events. I'm just waiting for the right person to come along to organize it all, because I'm incredibly uninspired to do all of that. Or I'll just keep doing what I'm doing now. And doing retreats in the Philippines, it's brand new for me, and I'm doing it in my house, which is something I've never done before. Normally my retreats were in Europe somewhere, or Hawaii. But Philippines, I know, is a very long way to travel for people who typically came to my retreats, which were folks in Europe and the US. So it's a long ways. And so, yeah, I'm open to the idea of bouncing around the globe again and doing events. We'll see. Am I from the Philippines? No, I'm from the US. I just haven't been back there in a really long time. But as I live here in Philippines, the locals keep talking to me in their language as if I might be Filipino, and I'm not. I'm a delightful mix of a bunch of different things. I don't know who I am. All right, you guys. Tell your friends, please. Help me grow this thing. You know what? Because that would actually be super helpful as well. Just practically speaking, the more people are aware of what I do, then the more likely people are to come to events, which means it makes it possible for me to come to events, because it doesn't make much financial sense to go off traveling again if no one shows up. All right, my dears. Maybe see you next week. Bye-bye. Thanks for being here.